Hi CLA family, Phil and Jill and Parker here. Wanted to say hello and that we love you and miss you. We really miss being able to see you all on a regular basis. And if you thought that Phil gave long hugs before COVID-19, you need to be prepared for afterwards because he is really missing out on being able to give hugs. We were just asked if we would share a little bit about what the Lord has been teaching us and growing us in, and so that's what we wanted to be able to do.
So that takes us to a place in the book of Genesis where a story about Abraham and Sarah has brought them to a place of intense kind of family trouble. They were waiting for a promise from God. The promise was that they would actually have children, specifically a son. And in the meantime, they tried to make it happen on their own by having a child through Sarah's servant Hagar. Now, Abraham's name was really Abram before they had a child, and Sarah's name was really Sarai, and that will come into the story. So they had this baby on the way through Hagar, and it brought up a jealousy with Sarai, and so she started mistreating Hagar to the point that Hagar ran away. And as a pregnant woman alone in the wilderness, God came and met her there. So in chapter 16 of Genesis, starting in verse 7, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that was beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. Skipping ahead to verse 13, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me.
Yeah, so in scripture, this is actually the first place that anyone names God. Any other place in Genesis where it is talking about the names of God, it's actually ways that he has revealed his character to the Israelites. He has given them those names. And yet here we're seeing that Hagar is naming God. And in Hebrew, that name is El Roi. And again, it means the God who sees me. And so we during this season have just been reminded of the fact that even though we are in this time of isolation and social distancing and all of these different changes within our norms, that God sees us and he knows, that he hasn't forgotten, that he sees all of the things, not only just in our circumstances, but in our hearts as well.
That's right. One experience that we had just recently where God saw us was this last week. My best friend had his birthday, and I wanted to give him a gift. I knew he needed some trees removed, but because he lived in Saskatoon, I didn't feel peace that we could go and visit him during this time of stopping unessential travel. So I decided to try to get a hold of a friend of mine, mutual friend, who's also an arborist in Saskatoon. Long story short, God provided a specific amount that I felt peace that we could spend on hiring this guy. He agreed to the amount. I asked Jillian whether she felt peace about it. She agreed to the amount. And my friend didn't have to hire anyone. He had someone come free of charge to do a gift of getting rid of the trees that were in the way of what he wanted to build at his house. Now that is great on its own. But the very next day, in the mail, a letter from my mother, including a check, unexpected,
And
for-
unannounced.
unannounced, for the exact amount that was the cost of getting rid of these trees. That was an amazing example to us that God was watching our hearts, and He cares about the delights of your heart, and He wants to partner in that and say, I see your desires, I see your delight, and I am providing all the way for it.
Yeah. So we just want to be able to encourage you today that God sees you. So maybe you are a parent who is overwhelmed right now, trying to juggle both working from home and suddenly homeschooling. God sees you, and He is your source of strength. And so we just want to encourage you that don't feel like it is a failure to acknowledge that you can't do it without Him, because the truth is it's false for us to think that we can. And so know that He sees you in the midst of all that you're going through right now.
And if you're someone who has lost a job, and the pressure of finances are mounting up, and the uncertainty of the future is there, God sees you there. And He is your provider. You do not have to fear. You do not have to try to come up with the solution on your own. God is watching, and He cares about you. There's all kinds of scripture where God speaks directly to providing for your needs. So you can ask God for your daily bread. And in the midst of that, you can have a place of peace where God will equip you not just to get rid of fear, but where you can be filled with hope, and you can go out and walk in generosity. You can do the exact opposite that the enemy would try to keep you from. You can walk in a place of giving the gift of your time, your skills, your ability, and even the provisions that God has given you. You can share them with others.
And maybe you are a woman who's pregnant right now, and you're not able to have a baby shower or share the joy of your growing baby bump and celebrate with your family and friends in the way that you thought you would. He sees you. He sees where there's those disappointments, where there's those longings. And even just tonight as we were talking, we were just reminded of the fact that God rejoices over us. And so know that He sees you, and He sees your longings, He sees your desires, but not only that He rejoices over you with singing. And so just even ask Him in the midst of this, in the midst of those longings, to be able to show Himself in that way. That you would understand even more what it means that He rejoices over you.
Yeah. And if depression has tried to come and take you out, know that God has come to give you joy.
Yeah.
He's come to take that garment, that garment of heaviness off of you, and give you a garment of joy. He is the God who sees you. He knows that there is negativity coming through the airways, but when you focus your heart on the Lord, when you read His word and hear His word to you, He declares Himself over you. I am the God who sees you. And just like Hagar, who still had to go back to the place where she had previously had so much trouble, she didn't go alone. She went with the God who sees her. And she also went with a promise from God that her life was going to matter. Her life was going to create such purpose. And there would be an abundance of descendants through her life. So God is watching you, and He sees you. Don't be afraid.
And just one last verse that we want to leave you with is from 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. And the last part of that verse talks about taking captive every thought that would exalt itself above the knowledge of Christ. And so we just want to encourage you that whatever circumstance you find yourself in, wherever the enemy would try to say to you that God doesn't see you, that He doesn't understand, take those thoughts captive. And just like Jesus responded to the enemy in the wilderness when he was being tempted, he responded with scripture. You can respond with scripture of saying, no, I know that God, El Roi, he is the God who sees me. And so we just encourage you with that today. We love you, and we can't wait to be able to be with you again in person. And we're just continuing to pray for you, and yeah, we miss you.
We love you. See you soon.